The walls of Orpheus Station did not echo. Sound was swallowed by insulation foam and decades of modifications, the kind that get layered over every time a project changes hands. It had started as a cooperative lab between Earth and the Yavari, until relations soured and the governments on both sides pulled funding, personnel, and accountability. What remained was sealed beneath kilometers of ice on Europa, ticking away in artificial time. Inside the vault, the lights never dimmed. Day and night were arbitrary concepts. For 17 years, the 4 children, though none of them were quite children anymore, had grown under constant surveillance. They were monitored not just for health but for anomalies, anything that strayed from the human baseline. Rhea pressed her forehead to the reinforced window that looked out into the sterile corridor. From here she could see nothing of the outside. Just the looping feed of hallway cameras, updated every 30 seconds. She knew every angle by heart. The others were scattered around the common chamber. Solon sat cross-legged near the nutrient dispenser, stripping wires from an old filtration console he'd pried open days ago. Naira hovered near the interface wall, tracing patterns in the screen's residual heat signature with her fingertip, reading it the way others read Braille. Theo was at the far end, crouched beside the locked door to Medical Unit 2, eyes closed as if listening for some distant engine only he could hear. No alarms had gone off. No guards had entered. But something had changed. Rhea's hands trembled as she pulled the panel off the wall behind her bunk. She had hidden the makeshift neural jack there, cobbled together from maintenance bots, abandoned diagnostics gear, and a processor stolen from a sleep monitor. The message had arrived 6 hours ago, unmarked, nested within a backup protocol that hadn't run in years. It wasn't Earth code. It wasn't Yavari either. It was a hybrid. Like them. She jacked in. The interface responded immediately, the message unfolding across her vision like a wave of sound without tone. It wasn't words exactly. It was structure. Intention. Someone had called out across the void with purpose. And that purpose was clear. They are coming to collect what they left behind. She pulled the jack free and stood. "We can't wait any longer," she said, loud enough to snap the others to attention. Solon looked up, fingers smudged with grease. "You sure?" "Yes." Naira was already at the console, overriding the lockdown protocols she'd spent months studying in silence. Theo moved to the airlock panel, unspeaking, always a half-second ahead of everyone, as if his thoughts arrived from somewhere just outside the present. The door to the vault groaned open for the first time since their births. Cold air swept in real and sharp. No alarms blared. No sirens. Just the sound of old machinery waking up from slumber. They didn't pack. There was nothing to bring. As they stepped into the corridor beyond the vault, the lights flickered for the first time in years. Something in the station's spine had noticed their exit. Something old. Watching. Remembering. Ahead of them, the passage forked, left toward the abandoned labs, right toward the surface tram. None of them spoke. They went right. The tram had been dormant so long that ice had crept into its joints, threading through the vent slats and forming brittle lattices beneath the floor panels. When the hybrid stepped inside, the sensors flickered awake one by one, confused by the sudden presence of 4 signatures it no longer recognized. Naira knelt by the access terminal, her fingertips brushing the control plate. Her skin responded to the current almost instinctively. She didn't need passwords. Her nervous system pulsed in ways human operators never could, interfacing directly with the outdated Yavari architecture buried beneath the Earth-made controls. "It's trying to reject us," she muttered. "Like we don't belong in its memory anymore." "Override it," Rhea said, glancing down the dim tunnel. "The station still thinks it's in lockdown." Theo watched the shadows near the tram's windows. "No. It thinks we're still locked inside." Solon slid into one of the side benches, resting his arms across his knees. "So if we trip the system we get drones on us?" "No," Rhea answered, "we get flooded. Remember the protocols." All of them did. The station didn't rely on armed guards or corridors full of turrets. It relied on pressure releases, emergency gas, vacuum shifts, designed not to kill, but to neutralize any anomalies. Naira's eyes fluttered, the connection reaching deeper. The tram systems groaned, then hummed. The rails below shuddered to life. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, It began to crawl toward the exit tunnel that led up through Europa's crust. "We've got about 12 minutes before the outer locks engage," Rhea said, watching the timer begin to count down in the control display. "Once that happens, the system knows we're moving." "And then what?" Solon asked. She pulled a small disk from her belt pouch. The surface gleamed with old etching, a Yavari communication array she had scavenged from a lab when she was 12. She'd spent the last 5 years reprogramming it. "We send a message." Theo's gaze turned toward her, unreadable. "We were never the only ones," Rhea continued. "The others, they hid them. Some were terminated. Some went deeper. But this signal, it's from one of them. And it didn't come from Earth." "Not Yavari either," Naira added, her voice a thread of certainty. "Hybrid." Rhea nodded. "Like us." The tram picked up speed. The tunnel lights passed faster now, illuminating fractured support beams and frost-covered bulkheads. No one spoke for a while. The air grew warmer the closer they came to the upper access platforms. Somewhere above, Europa's ice sheet groaned with its own slow drift. As they neared the surface junction, the tram halted abruptly. Not from system failure. From outside interference. A red indicator blinked on the wall panel. Manual override engaged. "Someone's waiting," Theo said. The tram doors opened. And standing alone in the corridor, weapons slung casually over one shoulder, was a man none of them recognized. Human, or close enough. He wore patchwork gear, layered for survival rather than style. His eyes scanned them once, landing on Rhea last. "You're early," he said. "Do we know you?" Rhea asked. "No," the man replied. "But I know what's chasing you. And I know what you're going to find if you keep moving." He tapped a small device on his wrist. A map projection flickered to life between them, Europa's southern ridge, Orpheus Station marked in white, and something far below it, pulsing in deep orange. "You're not the only ones they made," he said. "But you're the only one still unclaimed." "Unclaimed by who?" Solon asked, rising to his feet. The man gave a small, humorless smile. "By either side." He called himself Madrek. No surname. No title. Just that one name, spoken with the edge of someone who didn't care to be questioned. He didn't try to assert control over the group. Instead, he walked ahead and let them follow. They did, at first out of suspicion, then out of necessity. Outside the station's dome, the surface was a maze of glare ice and fractured outposts. The 5 of them traveled by foot through the buried layers of Europa's decommissioned expansion zone, corridors from an era when humanity still thought colonization would be permanent. Now it was a tomb of forgotten technology and zero maintenance. They stopped only when they reached a collapsed transit node draped in frost. Madrek climbed atop the remains and pried open a hatch using a fusion blade with no insignia. Beneath it, a cargo lift led down, farther than the vault had ever let them see. Rhea hesitated at the threshold. "What is this place?" "Old world waste," Madrek replied. "Full of discarded ideas." "Same as you." Solon's hand tensed slightly, but Rhea gestured for calm. The lift descended in silence. When it stopped, they entered a chamber flooded with ancient terminals and power lines. Much of the equipment had been cannibalized, but what remained pulsed with stubborn energy. Solar converters blinked in irregular rhythms. A data wall flickered weakly, projecting an array of files half-corrupted by time. "This," Madrek said, waving a hand at the clutter, "is what your creators didn't want you to see. The trials before you. The failed combinations. The prototypes that didn't survive long enough to become interesting." A flick of his wrist and the data wall reoriented. File after file appeared. Biometric reports, scanned tissue samples, psych profiles. Dozens of names, some crossed out. Others simply tagged removed. Theo stepped closer to the screen. They were like us?" "Sort of," Madrek replied. "Some had more Yavari than human. Some had less. Some were made without consent from either side. Didn't matter. Earth feared them. Yavari found them unpredictable." Naira's eyes traced the feed. "What happened to them?" Madrek crouched and pulled a metal crate from beneath a table. Inside were tags, rusted, stamped with strings of alphanumeric codes. Some were bent. Some still had faint stains. He didn't answer her question directly. "They didn't get to choose," he said. "They were studied, filed, and eventually discarded. And that would have been your future too. Until you broke protocol." Rhea folded her arms. "Why are you showing us this?" "Because I want you to understand what's coming," Madrek said. "Yavari Prime just sent a retrieval vessel. Not military. Something older. It doesn't land. It harvests. It was used during the early crossbreeding cycles. Salen's voice was flat. And Earth. Madrek stood, brushing frost from his gloves. They'll do what they've always done, pretend they never approved your existence, then eliminate the evidence. So what do you want from us? Rhea asked. Madrek looked directly at her, not with sympathy but with something colder, respect born of survival. Nothing, he said. I want you to pick a path with your eyes open. There's no middle ground. You either serve or you run. Theo looked back at the data wall. A small video clip autoplayed from one of the files. A hybrid child no older than 6, pressing her hand against a glass barrier, staring at something unseen. Where would we go? He asked quietly. Madrek shrugged. There's a place near the edge of the bone wastes. No domes. No politics. Only ghosts. Rhea met the other's eyes. There were no debates. Just a quiet consensus built from everything they had not said in the vault. They followed Madrek into the dark. The landscape beyond Europa's regulated zones was not marked on official maps. It stretched in broken waves of crushed regolith and ice-laced rock, scattered with the shells of early outposts and field stations stripped down to their girders. The place had once been designated for Yavari Earth cooperative testing. Now it was called the Bone Waste. They arrived in silence, riding an old crawler Madrek had buried beneath drift before reactivating its core. It creaked with every motion, each kilometer a battle between rust and inertia. Its plating bore no flags. No one came this far unless they were desperate or forgotten. At dusk, though Europa's sun gave only a smear of light, they reached the site. It wasn't marked by walls or towers but by bones. Not literal ones but segments of discarded tech and containment tubes cracked open like dry shells. Some were half buried, others melted into the ground. Faint markings in 2 languages circled each structure. The names had long since faded, worn away by freezing winds. Salen stepped out first, his boots crunching on uneven terrain. This where they dumped them? No, Madrek said. This is where they lost control of them. Figures moved in the distance, slow, uneven, hunched in posture. At first, the hybrids mistook them for scavengers. Then one stepped into view and Naira's breath hitched. He was older, maybe in his 30s. His spine curved with a Yavari's natural arc, but his skin had human tones. One eye glowed softly with data read functions. The other looked bloodshot and weary. He wore stitched rags over what had once been a monitoring suit. He looked at them as though expecting them to vanish. Then he spoke, voice dry and creaky. You're the new ones. Others emerged. Not many. Less than 20. Each a different configuration of parts, expressions, and survival mechanisms. Some looked almost human. Some barely did. But they all carried the same gaze. One shaped by isolation, suspicion, and years of being treated as property. Theo stepped forward. Why did you stay? A tall woman with mottled skin, gray-blue and scarred, answered. Because there was nowhere else to go. Madrek said nothing. He simply sat on a broken conduit and watched. Naira knelt beside one of the abandoned pods. She traced its rim, finding burn marks from an internal failure. These were the early iterations? The woman nodded. They wanted perfect hybrids. We didn't qualify. What do you want now? Rhea asked her. A long silence followed. To be left alone. Salen scanned the horizon, then pointed to a ridge where an antenna half buried in ice blinked faintly. That yours? No. That's still active. Yavari signal tracing, said the woman. They check once every cycle. They know some of us lived. Why haven't they come for you? They did. What? Most of them didn't leave. Rhea turned to Madrek. You knew about them? I helped some get out. Not all made it. Some didn't want to leave. Theo approached a child, small, quiet, more Yavari in form than human. She looked up at him and smiled, faint but genuine. Her teeth were crystalline. She yours? He asked the tall woman. No. But we don't count like that anymore. That night, they camped among the remains of failed dreams. They didn't light a fire. Europa would have swallowed the heat instantly, but they shared warmth in the only way that mattered, by listening. The hybrids from Orpheus didn't ask what side these survivors had chosen. They already knew. No one here belonged to Earth. No one here pledged to the Yavari. They'd carved out a third way. One without flags. One paid for with silence and loss. And in that quiet, something took root in Rhea's mind. They didn't have to be tools. They didn't have to run. They could become something else entirely. But to do that, they would need to confront both sides. The sky cracked open on the 3rd day. Europa had no real weather, but the upper atmosphere sometimes distorted when larger vessels entered orbit, especially those not designed to obey Earth's docking conventions. The clouds above the bone waste thinned, then warped, exposing a triangular silhouette hovering far too still to be natural. It didn't roar. It didn't descend. It simply hovered, casting no light, releasing no sound. Theo tilted his head, watching it with narrowed eyes. "They're not looking for us. They already found us," Rhea replied. From the vessel, a narrow thread of gravity-laced matter extended to the surface, an artificial tether, silver and precise. At its end, a pod. The pod touched down silently in the clearing just beyond the shattered settlement perimeter. It opened like an iris, petals folding outward with fluid elegance. Out stepped a Yavari. He was not armored, not accompanied. His skin bore no symbols of rank or name, but his presence felt practiced, measured as though sculpted for negotiation rather than conflict. His limbs were longer than a human's, torso structured in a way that suggested both strength and adaptation. The tall hybrid woman who'd spoken to them before took one step forward, then stopped. "That's a speaker," she said under her breath. "One of the old ones." The envoy didn't address the group. Instead, he fixed his gaze on the newcomers. "You were never meant to be discarded," he said in heavily filtered standard. "Only hidden. You were created during a time of ambition. Then came fear. Both sides made errors." Rhea stepped forward. "And now?" The envoy tilted his head. "Now we correct the course. A place has been prepared for you. One where you can thrive. Learn. Fulfill your original potential." Naira frowned. "You're offering protection?" "I'm offering alignment," he replied. "With us. With your deeper ancestry. Earth will never accept you. But we can teach you to become more." "More what?" Solon asked. The envoy took a few steps closer. "Your bodies are stable. Your mind's adaptable. You are what our first theorists hoped for. But your context, your upbringing, was compromised. Let us remove that influence. You will grow into what you were always meant to be." Theo's voice cut through the air like frost. "That sounds like replacement." "It is evolution." "No," Rhea said. "It's a new cage." The envoy's eyes shifted briefly, the thin membrane over them darkening. "You misunderstand. This is not coercion. It is invitation." "An invitation we can't come back from," Naira murmured. The envoy nodded. "Correct. Once you pass through the gate, the process begins. You will not return as you are." He gestured to the sky. The vessel above pulsed once, its tether drawing tighter. "You have until Europa's next rotation. Then the window closes." Without waiting for questions, the envoy returned to his pod. It sealed itself once more, rising swiftly along the tether into the dark. Silence followed. No one spoke immediately. Not even the survivors in the bone waste. Finally, Madrek exhaled and said, "Now you've heard it from them directly." Solon stared at the empty sky. "He talked like we were infrastructure." "They always did," Rhea muttered. Naira looked to Theo. "Would you go?" He didn't respond right away. Then, slowly he shook his head. "Not if it means forgetting who I've become." That night, none of them slept. Not because of fear, but because now they knew exactly what was being offered. And what they'd lose if they said yes. The message came in low-band bursts. An ancient relay post buried beneath Europa's crust sputtered to life, blinking out signals through rusting antennas and failing power coils. Madrek had set it to passive mode days ago, just in case Earth started listening again. Now it wasn't just listening. It was speaking. The projection unfolded across the broken floor of the shelter, flickering against metal walls and dust-covered equipment. Rhea stood nearest the display. Her arms crossed, jaw tight. A woman appeared on the feed, gray uniform, insignia blurred by static. Her voice was smooth but lifeless, every syllable ground down by policy and rehearsed threat. "This is a public directive from Earth Coalition Protocol Oversight. Subjects 7K through 7N, previously designated non-viable, have exited containment against regulation. They are to be considered compromised." The camera zoomed slightly on the speaker's eyes. "They exhibit signs of advanced genetic drift and behavioral unpredictability. Civilian or diplomatic contact is strictly prohibited. All units with regional jurisdiction are granted level black retrieval authority." Solon looked away first. "They're not even pretending anymore." Naira's fingers dug into the wall beside her. "They think we're still data. Still property." Theo stepped into the light, studying the broadcast not for its words, but for what was missing. "There's no call for negotiation. No return order." "No," Madrek said quietly, because they don't plan to recover you. They plan to erase the record. The feed continued, showing outdated files. Images of the hybrids when they were still children, still restrained, still under constant clinical supervision. A side-by-side comparison played next, displaying physiological metrics. Heart rate ranges, reflex times, Neuralink patterns. Rhea didn't flinch. They're making a case for destruction. They're making sure no one asks questions if we disappear, Naira said. The projection shut itself off as though satisfied with its announcement. For a long moment nothing moved. Then Rhea crossed the chamber and activated the relay's manual controls. What are you doing? Madrek asked. Sending a response, she said, tapping in an address string. Or at least a new set of coordinates. There are others like us out there, scattered, maybe still in hiding. Some won't even know they're hybrids until it's too late. Naira joined her. We'll send it in layers. Earth won't catch all of it. We're not ready to fight them, Solon said. We're not fighting them, Rhea replied. Not yet. But we're not staying quiet either. Theo stepped out into the corridor. He stared upward beyond the rock and ice, to where both threats, Earth and Yavari, waited. They don't want a war, he said half to himself. They want clean records. No ripples. No aftermath. Well, Madrek muttered, leaning back in his chair, that ship's already sunk. The transmission from Earth repeated, then looped into silence. The hybrids watched it fade. Their names or what passed for them hung in the air like ash. Not lost. Marked. And now the whole system would be watching. The air in the relay chamber had gone still. Not dead. Just waiting. Outside, a slow frost crept across the hull of the shelter, tracing spidery veins over windows and vents. The sky held no movement. The Yavari ship hadn't left, but it hadn't advanced either. Watching, waiting, for a signal or maybe for surrender. Rhea stood at the terminal console, her hands resting on the panel's edge. We don't have a lot of time. No, Solon said, pacing the far end of the room, but we've got options. Do we? Naira's voice was sharp. One side wants to override us. The other wants to delete us. Where's the third door? Theo sat on a metal crate, elbows on his knees. We can make one. Rhea looked over at him. Say it. He did. We split. Madrek raised an eyebrow. Interesting strategy. And here I thought I'd seen every flavor of youth-driven rebellion. Theo ignored him. Not permanently. But we don't all want the same outcome. Rhea, you've always been wired to run. Solon, you're built to fight. Naira wants to be heard. I don't know yet. Naira glanced sideways. You're serious? Deadly. Rhea exhaled. Let's call it what it is. We can't walk the same road anymore, not as one unit. Too much on us now. Too many ways this ends. So, Madrek muttered, a vote. Rhea nodded. No guilt. No arguments. Just say it. She started. I want out. Not to hide, not forever, but to disappear long enough to find somewhere the signals don't reach. Build a space for others like us. Let this war pass through without defining us. Solon stepped up next. I want to face them. Yavari. Both. I want them to know we saw their offers and said no. Not from a safe place. Right in front of their gates. Naira was quiet. Then, I want to broadcast the truth. Show the system what they buried. What they bred. Not just us, but the discarded, the forgotten. Make them watch. Make them remember. Eyes turned to Theo. He didn't stand. He just looked at them one at a time. We don't have to agree on method, he said. But we agree on one thing. We're not theirs. And we're not some accident in the files. He looked out the window toward the faint shimmer of the Yavari vessel. We were supposed to pick a side, he said. That's the trap. The trick is we don't. We stop being a consequence. We become a presence. Rhea stepped back from the console. 3 plans. 1 cause. Naira nodded. Different voices. Same message. Solon grinned just slightly. Let's raise a little interference. Madrek stood slowly. You're making a mess of things, you know. This system likes neat categories. Good, Rhea said. Let them choke on the mess. They packed quietly. Shared tools. Shared codes. Solon handed Naira his knife just in case. Rhea gave Theo a half-charged beacon. Madrek offered no advice. Only transport. The crawler split from the shelter just before Europa's nightfall. 1 vehicle veered west. 1 east. 1 stayed put, tapping into buried transmitters. By the time the Yavari ship moved again, the hybrids were no longer a single group. They were a network. A ripple. A refusal. The relay station above Europa's southern ridge was half buried in frost, its antenna angled like a broken finger pointing toward deep space. Inside, Naira adjusted the frequency shifter Madrek had left behind, sweat clinging to her neck despite the cold. The broadcast buffer was unstable, patched together with scavenged components and far too many loose ends, but it worked. She hit record. Across the moon, Rhea entered the coordinates for the drifting satellite near the edge of the system. No name. No active owner. It was barely more than a hollow metalkin orbiting nothing. But it could carry their payload. Not all of it, just the seed. Solon stood in an abandoned comms bunker once used for tactical scans. A Yavari drone hovered near the remains of a wall-mounted scanner, unaware it had already been spoofed. His hands hovered above the manual override for the thermal vents. One last signal. One last echo. Naira's voice traveled through the system. This is not a request. This is not a cry for help. This is a record. She paused, then continued slowly. We are not anomalies. We are not failed experiments. We are not weapons or property or problems to solve. We were made, then forgotten. Now we speak. The signal fractured into 3 parts. Rhea's code attached next. You can silence our locations. You can flag our identities. You can trace this transmission to the edge of every moon you've poisoned. But you will never erase what we are. We are what comes next. Not designed. Not approved. Chosen. Solon's voice followed, rougher. You wanted silence. Control. A future that obeys your template. But we've seen both sides now. Earth's orders. Yavari promises. We reject them. We refuse. The message closed on static. A long hiss. Then a final whisper. Theo's voice, recorded earlier, played from a hand-sized capsule dropped into Europa's frozen plains. We're not waiting for a place. We'll make it. The system caught it. Not all at once. But it spread. Off-world miners with old comms units picked it up during rest shifts. Freelancers aboard outposts forwarded pieces. Yavari technicians, curious, confused, translated and logged it into restricted archives. The Earth Coalition's listening posts flagged it as unauthorized biological propaganda. Too late. The signal had already mutated. It was duplicated, altered, rebuilt. Not as one voice but as many. In the following weeks, scattered groups across the moons of Jupiter, the mines of Ceres, the gravity wells around Kepler colonies, all whispered the same words. Not theirs. Not yours. Ours. No one ever caught the hybrids again. Some say Rhea escaped the system entirely, heading for the black zones where no navmap worked. Others claim Naira's broadcast network still operates in deep band channels no regulator can jam. There are unconfirmed sightings of Solon in asteroid fields, turning Yavari patrols into cautionary tales. As for Theo, some say he walks among humans and aliens both, face unrecorded, name never spoken. A living message. They didn't win a war. They didn't start one either. They became something else. A presence no one could erase.